Hello and welcome to the FringePOD. I'm Connor, I'm a theatre maker and director here in Adelaide, and I work for the Adelaide Fringe Artists and Venues team. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land we meet on today is the land of the Kaurna people, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Joining me today are Tom and Jennifer, and we're going to be talking about From Nothing to Something, what it is like building a show, starting from an idea and taking it all the way to putting it in front of an audience. Welcome. So let's start by telling me a bit about yourselves, who you are as artists.
Who are you, Tom?
Oh, who am I? My name's Tom, and I'm from a company called First Acrobats, and we produce acrobatic comedy for the last sort of 10 years, and we mostly perform in fringe festivals around the world. That's me.
I'm Jennifer Wong, and I am a comedian, and I am at Adelaide Fringe for only the second time. And when I'm not doing festivals, I'm writing and sometimes hosting shows.
Nice. When did you first come to Adelaide Fringe? What was that experience like?
Oh, well, for me, last year was the first time as a performer, and the experience I had was incredible. I hadn't done stand-up since 2018, so there was about a 4-year gap, and it was my first time coming back to do stand-up as someone who now knew how to manage her depression after it not being treated for 20 years. And so you can imagine doing your first solo show again after not doing it for a while, and then going into a venue and feeling quite nervous and everything. But I was so lucky to be in a venue where the people that ran it were so loving and caring and kind. And it made such a big difference that the rest of the year I did more shows than I'd ever done before I was unwell. So Adelaide is a very special festival for me.
Yeah, beautiful. What was the venue?
Prompt Creative Centre. Libby and Matt there are incredible.
They're a great team.
My first Fringe feels like a long time ago. 2014 at the Royal Croquet Club. We performed our first version of an acrobatic comedy show called Elixir. And it was a very exciting time for me, straight out of circus school, producing. I just come back from a tour of Europe working for another acrobatic company that travelled around in a van and did shows on the street and in theatres. So I just learned a little bit about touring and how to put things together. And it was our first sort of swing at the Fringe and doing our own thing. So it was very exciting.
Yeah, gorgeous. So today we're going to talk a bit about where an idea starts and how we take that all the way to putting it in front of an audience. So let's start with the idea. Where do you get the idea for a project from?
Oh, it could come from anywhere. For us, in the style that we do a lot of archetypal characters, character-based comedy. So we look for structures that can be burlesqued or taken and flipped on their head. Being all-male acrobatic troupe, we look for strong male archetypal characters that you can twist. So our latest production is called Gods, and they're all ancient gods of Mount Olympus. So it's a very easy to visualize idea, and there's a lot of structure existing in the public knowledge, in the common knowledge of Greek myths. You don't have to go very far to find how it has influenced culture. So like there's Disney, Hercules, it's very like surface level, and that's the kind of things that we look for so that we can make comedy that's very understandable and easy to digest.
How about yourself, Jennifer?
Well, the show that I worked on last year, the idea for that, the show was called Jennifer Wong Has No Peripheral Vision. And the idea for that came from wanting to explore what it means to talk about like diagnosis and recovery and treatment for two different medical things that I've experienced. And I guess depression was one of them, and an eye condition was another, where like my peripheral vision is like getting worse and worse. And so it's rarely that clear cut that something arrives that it's just like, that's what I want to talk about. But I think last year the reason why I even did Fringe at all or even did a show was because I wanted to see if I could do it again. Because when I stopped in like 2017, 2018, I kind of didn't think about whether or not I would do it again. And I think with like creative pursuits, the thing is that sometimes life gets in the way and you might have to put it down and come back to it. And so that's what drove me last year, was just like, can I even do this? And so those were the things that I thought, if I do this just one more time to see if I can do it, I guess these are the ideas that I would happily entertain myself with for all the time leading up to Fringe, to think about and work about and try to make funny.
I think I have a similar experience with my own practice. Like, inspiration doesn't always just appear. You find yourself kind of circling different ideas and thoughts, and eventually that kind of snowballs into a project of such. Yeah, for sure. And then when you've got that idea, what do those next few steps look like, getting it up into perhaps the development world?
For us, it's casting. So we try to think about being a circus. We try to think about what acts are exciting and what acts could fit the world that we're doing, or if we're stuck on an act that we really want, how can we shoehorn it in? Narrative circus is not extremely popular and hasn't been in vogue for quite a while now. Like the biggest Australian companies, at least, that perform circus do so they leave a lot of the story up to the audience to make up their own mind as to what is happening. So being a narrative circus company, we really try to focus on the how and the why that things are happening in the world. So that's where we start with, is casting and what are we going to do physically when we're there, because that's what people are coming to see. They're coming to see you do, crazy tricks on different things.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely the same for me as a stand-up. Lots of crazy tricks.
Backflips, all of the.
Oh yeah, for sure. The aim is to get back in the same spot as you started, so that you're facing the mic the right way.
Right. That's
crucial for a stand-up. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about you? Do you test out your material, or do you go in blind? What do you do?
Just peripherally.
Yeah, peripherally. Because I can't see anything at this point. Pretty much. Definitely testing out the material is really important for a stand-up, like doing whether it's open mics or trial shows or things like that. But I think something that's a little bit less obvious that I get really excited about is when you commit to doing a show and that deadline is there, instantly everything becomes something that could be in your show. Yeah. And so you walk around being extremely observant to everything. So that is a huge part of the development for me. So it's like if I'm chatting with someone and they laugh, I will write that down. I won't write it down in front of them, but I'll make a note. It's like, why did that laugh happen? And is that something that could be in my show in the same way or in another way? Like I might be listening to music, and phrasing for me is something that I really like to pay attention to. So, is there something pleasing about the way that was phrased that could be in the show? Like, beginnings and endings and middles are always important to show. How did that movie begin? Why was that ending compelling? So that for me is a joyful part of the creating and developing, is to just be so soaking up everything to be like potential. Yeah.
I think when I'm developing work, the best mindset to be in is a mindset that is curious and asking those questions, and why did that work? Why didn't that? Is that something that resonates with you?
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. It's actually a really joyful way to live. And unfortunately, when you are being a creative person who also has to look after the career component of your practice, like you can't always be in that mode, because sometimes you're just scanning receipts to put in your app so that you can claim it as an expense, and that doesn't require that level of attentive mindfulness. Although it can, I'm sure. But that is probably my favorite part of being a person who gets to do something creative, is just to constantly be curious and alive to what's around you and try to make meaning from it. Yeah.
How about you, Tom?
I feel like we're always, as comedians in a way, we're always searching for new jokes. Why is this funny? Fleshing out the show. anytime that there's a laugh or anytime you see something funny, you can't help yourself but like get into the structure, the nitty gritty of why did that work? Why wouldn't it work? Would it work if we delivered it?
Yeah.
How can we? Yeah. It's always, I'm looking for it.
And when you've got an idea, how can you tell that it's a good idea? Is it a gut feeling or is it something else?
Well, for me personally, as an artist, I have no self-doubt. And so I believe concretely that anything I come up with is going to be brilliant.
Absolutely.
So that's my answer. No, you never know.
Yeah.
You don't know. The audience is a great feedback system. You know, they will tell you loudly and quietly what they think of your ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably a very honest way of working, is to look back on this is what I do. Like I look back on every set or every performance, or, you know, listen back to a recording. It's like, why is there no laughing here? You know, am I being confusing? Am I not setting up a joke properly? Am I being boring? You know, is this too wordy? So that is the ultimate feedback system for me. But I think, how do you know it's a good idea? You just kind of like, something tickles you.
Yeah.
And you kind of just have to play with it for a bit, like a bit of clay, right? It's like you don't actually ever really know.
Yeah. And I feel like if it excites you, it must have some potential, right?
Yeah.
If you're excited to do it, it's most likely worth watching.
Yeah.
So if you're not excited to do it, then that's probably the tell.
Yeah.
And it translates to an audience as well, I suppose. And does the audience play a similar part in your development?
Well, one of the problems, I guess, with being acrobatic as opposed to stand-up is once you've built it, there's not really that much flexibility to change.
But you guys are so flexible.
Yeah.
See?
Done it again. So we kind of have to birth our things very finished or very close to finished. So we try to do our feedback in the development stage. We try to get in front of the audience a few times, or at least peers, and then make our changes. But a gut feeling has treated us well so far. So maybe we're at the stage now where we comfortably don't doubt it.
Yeah. Do you have any exercises or strategies you go about when trying to develop an idea? Like for me, journaling or kind of seeking out inspiration from other artists always kind of helps fuel an idea that I have. Is there anything that methods that you go to?
I think for me, talking to people about what I might have in mind and seeing what their response is. You know, I used to work in radio for a little bit, and I think I always apply like a show title or a show concept. Like, is this something that I could go on radio and have the name be read out or have the show be described in a way that would make a listener kind of go, oh, why? I would like to know more about that, you know? So like being able to communicate a concept in a way that might interest someone else is probably kind of something that I think about. I've actually forgotten what your question was at this point. I'm sorry.
Okay. It was about like methods or strategies you use when creating a show. So how do you develop the material?
Oh, how do you develop the material? I open a Google Doc and then I just start writing and writing and writing. Yeah. And then every day I go back and then I write some more. Yeah. On the things that I have written previously. And the best thing I ever learned, and something I love, is a comic in Sydney called Tommy Dean, who's from the States. Very early on, when I first met him, like almost 20 years ago, he said a lot of comics, they do this thing where, like, imagine you're going down a supermarket aisle and they just want to go through the entire supermarket. He goes, why don't you spend a little bit of time in just the one aisle, like, and explore that aisle? Yeah. Just give that some time before you go through the rest of the supermarket. So I'm always thinking, have I gotten the absolute most that I can get out of this thought or premise? Yeah. As opposed to trying to cover a lot of things. And I think it forces you to kind of go a little bit deeper, because my natural inclination is just to scattergun and do lots of different things. Yeah.
I love that. How about you, Tom?
I think I'm quite similar in that our creative work is often quite chaotic in its inherent nature. So for us, first thing we try and do is make scenes or skits and then storyboard it. So if we've made some stronger scenes that we definitely want to keep, we try to then shuffle things around until a narrative that we're satisfied with can start to form. And we just, before we get started, we just list as many common ideas about a concept as we can and start to like, circle our favorites and shuffle them around until, and that can take the longest part. You can have all these scenes. Like for our latest show, I think we've got a whole 2 other shows of just material that didn't make it. So we could have Gods B and C just out of scenes that almost made it into the show. So yeah, it's just create as much as you can and filter. Yeah.
I think learning that distinction was a huge turning point for me. Because if you don't know that at some point you have to then have a sense of discernment and curatorial sense about your own thing that you have accumulated, then you could just keep accumulating more things. But at some point it's just like, if you have 4 weeks, you might be like, okay, so the first week and a half is just that big brain dump. But then week 2 and 3 is like, well, what's actually going to make the cut? And they're 2 different mind spaces, right? Like one is like an expansive process and another one is a process of elimination and kind of subtraction. So like you don't ever want to be in the second mode when your job is actually to be in the first mode. So I find that helps. Like, where am I in the process? Yeah.
And what does the time frame of a process look like for you? Is it do you let an idea brew for a long time before you start putting it into practice?
Do you, Tom?
Well, I think so. We've had the idea for Gods for years before we did it. I had the idea for Gods before we made our last show, Railed, which is a cowboy themed show. We ended up just picking Railed at the time. Sometimes these decisions come down to, because at the end of the day, you've got to pay your employees. Sometimes the decision comes down to marketing. And when we made Railed, cowboys were in. They were really in, and it just seemed like the funnest thing to do, to make a spaghetti western circus cowboy themed show. But the whole time in my mind, I was like, Greek gods, that's going to rip. One day we're going to do that. Like,
not too soon?
Not too soon. How long? 6,000 years or something?
Maybe next Fringe.
I know nothing about it. I only know Disney Hercules. And then, so the idea, like letting an idea brew for a while is good. But the thing that for us really stood out when we made Gods is we did a 3-month development. And I won't go back to doing a short development unless, something happens and we just can't happen. We have to make it in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It really, really helped just have that large amount of time to fully flesh it out and get it. And so when we made it and when we first debuted it, I would say that it's 90% similar to what we're doing now 3 years later.
Yeah, right.
Because it had such a long development and we iterated it many times, it was able to be finished when it actually finished, which is rare in the Fringe world and in theatre production world. So yeah, for us now, long developments are good.
Yeah. How about you, Jennifer?
I think time is such a luxury when you're making things right. Like there's the money component. There's also sometimes the logistical component that's completely out of your control, which is the seasonality of all the different Fringe and arts and comedy festivals, right? So like having come back to do it for the 2nd year now, like before there was probably a 5, 6, 7 year period where I was doing festivals regularly. And when you're in that mode, you're kind of like, well, at this point in the year, you have to get your application in. So you're writing this fictional blurb about what your show is going to be, having not written your show.
Yeah.
It's if you ever want to see an example of vague language, pick up any comedy festival program for vague language. And then that starts, right? And then you've got that first festival that you write for. So I'm not sure if I've ever done anything that's had a 3-month development.
Yeah.
I've probably had 3 months between applying and actually like doing that first night, but I wouldn't be like in like just developing that one show in that 3 months, because this is not what I do full time. You know, there's like the freelance work, the day job work, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think having that luxury of time is so important. But at the same time, it's like sometimes a deadline is a really good way to get your idea to actually happen, because if these festivals didn't exist, it's very easy not to write a single joke.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Do you find it's helpful to have an objective and a deadline?
I don't know if I would work otherwise.
Yeah.
The accountability of that opening night and that obligation that you have to be there with your material is it's really important. Yeah.
And how do you go about the challenge, say, of when you pitch the show at first to maybe a funding body or to someone programming, and then the idea might change in development, and then you find it going down a different path? Is that something that's difficult to navigate, or how do you go about that?
Tom, I might let you field this one, because I suspect you have more experience with funding than me.
We've never been funded.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we make what we make.
Yeah.
I have felt pressure from festivals when you worked your way up, and you scrapped this year, sold out, did well, get the next venue, got bigger, sold out, did well, get the next biggest venue. Then all of a sudden you're kind of headlining the festival, and they're like, it better be good. And you're like, okay, it better be good. Like that's that kind of pressure, but we're just not very good at writing grants. If there's any good grant writers out there, hit me up.
Nice. I've completely lost my train of thought. So,
would you like me to tell you about my grant writing
absolutely,
experience?
please.
My
Thank
grant
you.
experience. Okay, so
Tell me about it.
So I, until last year, had never received a grant.
Wow.
I have received 2 grants. So I actually thought that you, having had such a huge, long career, that maybe some of it came through like a grant situation. But it seems like we are in the same boat. Comedy doesn't get grants so much as like dance, for example, or theatre. And the grants that I got are both associated with Adelaide Fringe. So Adelaide Fringe has the Artist Fund grants, and they were very generous last year. A lot of people received these grants in order to come to Adelaide. I would not have come to Adelaide if I did not receive this grant. It would have been a huge financial risk for me to take to come from interstate, I live in Sydney, to do a festival that I'd never done before, and to pay for my accommodation, venue, posters, flyers, marketing, like all the things that it costs to do a festival. So if I hadn't received the grant, I wouldn't have come. I was lucky enough to receive it again this year. And then I guess I have received 3 grants. I just realised.
There we
because very late into this year, I think it was this year. This year's only been going for 3 months. At some point during the year.
We lose all sense of time
What
in
is
the festival.
The South Australian Mental Health Commissioner kindly said that they would put money towards shows that had a mental health theme. And so I applied for that and was lucky to receive some money for that as well. That's awesome. That helped with things like doing like printing and flyers and stuff like that, and per diems, which I never would have thought to give myself, things like that. And so that was incredible. Like, I've never had this experience before. Everything that I do has always been pay to play with all the festivals, right? Yeah. So your question about like whether or not I've ever had to adjust my work in order to satisfy the requirements of a funding body or a festival, I think the thing is that because no one's paying, I can do what I like, because no one is telling me otherwise what to do except the audience who does or does not buy a ticket to my show. That is how I ultimately find out what the feedback is. Yeah.
I do want to say, though, that whilst our shows never got a grant, we got a grant this year from the Fringe for lighting from Novatech. We're running the festival hub Fool's Paradise in Victoria Square, and that made a huge difference. And now we have a beautiful light tunnel on site. So whilst the shows, we've never got any creative grants, we did get an infrastructure grant this year, and that made an enormous difference. So maybe that's the direction that we'll go with funding now, because our company is kind of changing. So thank you, Adelaide Fringe and Novatech, for that awesome light tunnel. It's so good.
Did it completely brighten your experience?
It did brighten my experience.
Let's stick with that for a bit. So you're programming Fool's Paradise this year.
Yeah.
How do you go about programming a venue?
Panic. Call everyone that I know and ask them if they want to do a show. So you got a solo show.
I will see you next year.
Yeah, honestly, we'll chat after this. I'm running one in the Brighton Fringe in the UK, so we can have a little chat. We got a tent, a circus tent, and we were like, we'll put our tent up in the garden or Gluttony, and we put it up in the garden in 2022. And then the opportunity came to have our own site, and then we did that last year, and then once we were in that world, more opportunities popped up at different festivals. We did the Wynnum Fringe, provided a venue. We did Sydney Fringe, programmed a venue, put a cafe up. And then Melbourne Fringe, we did 2 venues and a bar. And then back here, we're doing 3 venues, a bar. So it's kind of just rolls on. And you get a bit trapped too. Of like, oh my God, like pressure, we gotta do this. We got to get it done.
Dude, how are you here right now?
I don't know.
Shouldn't you be doing something?
Yeah, I mean, my phone's on Do Not Disturb, so Do Not Disturb.
This is your rest and restoration hour.
It's been, honestly, circling back to your other question, it's been really hard. Like, we had one festival go poorly, and like I'd been working so hard for so long and I was going to hire an administrator. And then that festival went poorly. And so like all that plan, you're working like 70 hours a week for months on end, and then doing acrobatic shows at night every day. So you're sitting on the computer. I had one of our lighting techs in Sydney had emergency appendicitis just before we opened.
Oh gosh.
So I had to learn the lighting software and be the tech for all the shows, like the 30 shows in, and then do my show. And like Cal, my business partner, was running the cafe and like doing the plumbing and the electricity and stuff. It's like wildly insane world that you just get sucked into. And then if something goes wrong and you don't have the funds then and there to fix it, the show must go on, and that applies to all aspects of the business. So all of a sudden you're just deep in it. And yeah, that's how we got there.
How do you stay on top of it all?
Working a lot. Yeah, just constantly hammering it night, morning, before show, after show, until you're clear, and then you can get someone to do it. But that opportunity hasn't come yet. So pray for us.
Well, you're doing a really great job. It's a great venue this year.
Well, I think it looks awesome. I think people are really enjoying it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Hopefully soon you'll see us and we'll be strutting around without anything to do, just doing our show and like talking to people. Yeah. But yeah, Fringe changed. Like we used to like socialize quite a lot and get out and meet everyone, do that sort of thing. But it's completely changed now. It's just what happens, I guess. Yeah.
Jennifer, how do you go about navigating the pressure of putting up a new show?
One thing I've learned in the last 40 seconds is to put things in perspective. I am doing one show. I am not running a venue, 30 shows, and also performing acrobatics at night. So, perspective is good. Yeah. But all jokes aside, I think that the thing that's I've learned in the last year, having toured more than I did previously, is if you can, the the rest period after something big, if you can, is a really big thing to factor in as part of the entire run of one's show. And I think that can be a luxury because you might be going from here straight to another festival. And so it's not like after every festival you can have rest. But I have only learned in the last little while that you can't actually function. It's not sustainable to function on festival mode all the time. Not for me anyway. I can't do it.
No.
So I have to not beat myself up when I do need a few days of being catatonic when I get home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're developing ideas as well for shows, I suppose failure can be a huge part of it, and realizing that things aren't working. Do you find that beneficial though, and that you learn a lot from when an idea kind of hits a brick wall or maybe doesn't go anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, failure is a part of life in every aspect, and it's the best learning tool there is, and it's going to happen. Creatively, I tried to put myself in situations where I would fail quite a lot when I was starting out. So when we were making our first show and trying to make our company tourable and functional, we would do a lot of street performing because my business partner, he was a fantastic street performer, and he kind of taught me how to do it. And there's nothing quite like getting 30 cents from a street show to make you really feel like you're not all there. So that was really good, like constantly putting ourselves in that position where we would fail, and then when it does start to work, that's really good for you in a lot of aspects. So and failure can come in so many. You have to be comfortable with failure if you're going to be in the arts. Like, it's going to happen. Yeah, like for us right now, not being able, like, it's kind of having to work so much is kind of a failure in itself. Like, not being able to get to the point where we can take a load off, because people are always asking us, "Oh, why don't you have someone doing this? You're biting off more than you can chew. Why don't you have someone doing this?" And they don't realize we're actually trapped. Like, we're trapped working this hard until we get that success. So, and you have to be comfortable with it. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Yeah.
Yeah. How about for you, Jennifer?
You have to fail. Like, there is no guarantee. Can you imagine the guarantee, like the persistent guarantee of success every day you walk out the door?
Yeah.
Like, you have to fail. If you're working, you will fail. But if you do not work and you do not fail, you won't also experience, I don't want to use the word success because it's quite loaded, but you won't experience the opposite of failure, which could be a different thing for every person. It could be a sense of achievement. It could be knowing that that night you gave it everything that you had. You know, you've got to be comfortable with something not going right. And I think part of that is also knowing how little control you have of some things. Like, we can control the jokes that we write, the warm-ups that you do, the lighting that's paid for kindly by, who was it again?
Novatech, thank you very much.
Yeah, right? But you can't control how an audience member is going to respond on the night to anything. Despite you knowing that it worked on Wednesday, it may not work on Thursday. And part of the magic of that for me, I think, is that because you don't know how that's going to go, it could actually go really well. It could also not.
Yeah.
But part of the thing about what we do, I think, is that you make an offering and then it goes and it does its own thing, which is out of your control, whether it's the lows or the highs. And so making sense and accepting that failure as part of the process is really important. There's a comedian in the UK called Sarah Millican, and she has this thing called the 11 a.m. rule. Have you heard of it?
No.
So if she has a night that doesn't go so well or to her liking, whatever, she can stew about it the whole night and the whole morning. But you get to 11 a.m. and you've got to stop
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
I love that.
because there's another show on that night.
Yeah.
So I think if you're committed to the long run, the failures are just things that happen along the way. I remember when I first started doing open mic, it was just like your first couple of open mics might suck. But if you have another gig in your calendar, then it doesn't matter, because that getting better is going to take lots of not going well in order for you to improve. So it's like always have the next gig in the calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great. Developing an idea can often be quite a vulnerable and personal process. How do you go about approaching others for feedback and letting them into the project?
I can answer this one first if you like.
Please.
So for me, I have to say that I'm not someone who needs to sit down with someone to write. Like I very much prefer to be just doing my own thing. And if I'm doing something for theatre and there's a director to work with, that's great. Like I enjoy that feedback process. But I think for stand-up, it's ultimately the audience is going to be the biggest provider of feedback. And I think, so to answer your question about like how do you do the thing about being vulnerable and all of that kind of stuff, like it's a very internal decision making for me that has come with time and being able to know what it actually is that I want to or have to say, which is something that I didn't have when I first started. I think knowing yourself, what you're comfortable with sharing and why you want to share it is the biggest part of that. And then the rest of it is up to other people to interpret. I actually don't feel like I've answered your question.
That's fine.
I actually don't feel like I've answered your question.
I'm interested. Do you find with stand-up comedy that there's traditionally less directors, or is that like an individual thing where you would use a director at a different time, or what's your decision with direction? When do you decide to bring one on or use other forms of input?
I feel like I am a baby at stand-up. Like I feel like I'm still figuring out, what I want to say, how I want to say it. And it's not like people who are very, very experienced who are fine-tuning a show that they're going to be recording at like Madison Square Garden or whatever. Maybe at that point you're like, yeah, you do want to have someone tell you that you do something weird with your hands. Actually, maybe you want someone to tell you that at any point, but like not to say that's all that a director does. But I think for me at the moment, a luxury and a privilege that I see in my mind is how wonderful to do a form of something creative where I can actually work with an audience to figure out what it is that I want to say and how to say it. So yeah, that's why I don't have a director, although I feel very silly saying I don't have one as opposed to be like, I don't want any feedback. That's not the case. It's just, I feel like it's okay at the moment to gently figure out what I'm doing.
I think it's okay at any time to be like, no, my idea. Even if it's not like about that, I just think that's just really interesting to see how other creatives use direction.
Yeah.
And it's just a tool, right? It's just any other tool. A director is just another fantastic tool that you can choose to employ or not.
Yeah, and if direction is feedback, like I'm all about feedback.
Yeah.
There's feedback from the audience, feedback from people who see the show, and then they, literally tell you what you think or tell you by being an audience member what they think of your show. And I will make changes based on that feedback. So it's not like I don't have that as a part of my practice, but just there's not just one. It's just that there's no one single person who tells me what to do.
Yeah. I like that idea that anyone is the director, the audience, an actual director or colleagues.
I don't know how directors would feel about that. Like, we're all directors. Actually, we are all. No. It's a real thing. Yeah.
So we've developed an idea now. We've put it up in front of an audience. Sometimes you're doing really long runs or seasons of a show. How do you keep it alive and fresh and exciting?
I think you have to have a baseline level of passion for what it is that you're doing. So regardless if things go well, badly, how I'm feeling, I need to be excited to get up and do acrobatics. Like I need to be like pumped that I'm going to go and spin on my head or swing on a trapeze and do flips. That helps, obviously, just having that baseline gratitude for being an artistic performer and a physical performer. And being lucky that we do comedy as well. So we're always able to fine tune and find new jokes and explore new areas. And we have a lot of freedom within our company and our group to foster that in each other.
So let's talk a bit about your experience with Adelaide Fringe. What makes you want to come back?
It's the first, it's the second Fringe festival I ever did. And it's the first place I ever toured to. Me and Cal, we built a seesaw and some handstand canes and we loaded his van and came on over and did a bunch of street shows. So it's always got that feeling of like love and a place where you start. And it's where we've put down roots as a company and artistic practice. We're now trying to foster a space in which others can thrive. It's a well-known thing that fringes are getting tougher and tougher financially. It's tough times everywhere financially. So we were quite lucky in that we caught the tail end of when things were a little bit easier, like sort of 10 years ago, before the versus split minimums became the norm and the massive markups on marketing became the norm. So we feel quite rough for companies starting out now, like people graduating our circus school and trying to make an artistic business. We're like, oh my God. So that's kind of why we've made Fool's Paradise. I'm going to just advertise a little bit about what we're doing. So it's a place where you can perform your show and you pay nothing. It's a 70-30 split. The split's done by the Fringe. No party receives a settlement in full or has any opportunity to add recharges onto the other. So we take a risk on you, you take a risk on us, and we just try and make it work together. So it's an artist-led precinct, and we're doing it in Adelaide in the hope that we can push it out into the world and try to bring back that shared risk model as opposed to a venue just absolutely guaranteeing themselves against any fallout by taking a lot from the artists. So, yeah.
Great, I love that. How about yourself?
I had such an amazing time in Adelaide last year, and the audiences here I find to be particularly special in their openness. Probably as audiences who've been going to Fringe for a long time. You know, I would meet people who'd come to the show last year who come from the Blue Mountains in New South Wales every year because Fringe is so accessible and affordable. The number of shows that they can see at Fringe in 4 weeks, basically, actually the couple was really funny. They come to Fringe and see every show that they can for 4 weeks.
Wow.
And then they don't see anything for the rest of the year in the Blue Mountains or in Sydney. So they just kind of come here for that. But for me, it's I have to say that the support of the festival has been incredible. It's, you know, when you're independently produced and hustling on lots of other different little jobs in order to make a living or whatever, like when a festival says, actually, we believe in your idea and we will give you some money to come and try out your idea. It's just like, well, thank you very much. I will come and try out my idea. And also my venue, like, you know, the people that we work with are so important, right? Like time is the biggest thing, you know, time to develop stuff, time to work and whatever. I think when a venue like the one that I'm at, Prompt, when the people who work there, Libby and Matt, who are themselves producers and performers, when they can take that time that they are have so little of and to extend the care that they have to their performers, like there was no doubt that I would come back and want to experience that. It literally fuels me for the rest of the year when I'm going to do other festivals, to be able to, in a moment of vulnerability, to start a new show, to be around people who really prioritize like caring for one another, which is just, there's the money part of it is like no one's. Maybe actually there are probably people who are making lots of money at festivals and fringes. I am not one of those people, and I really appreciate being able to see the audience face to face in an environment where the people who are running the venue are just so believing in the meaning of what we try to do every night. Yeah.
Great. It's lovely to hear about your experiences. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. And you can follow us on all of our socials to hear more.